All right, so I'm taking what we were going to talk about next week, and we moved it to this week. And the reason why is because of the service we had on Sunday. And I'm sorry that none of you got anything out of it, because they wrote the service particularly for me. If you don't believe me, you can ask Mom. I had Mom on one side, my good friend Shelly on the other side, and Shelly's doing this through the whole service. Because everything Randy said is just right me. So, so we decided to rearrange a little bit when we're doing what, and go ahead. And this was actually Mom's idea to move this up to this week. Where we're coming from, the outline I'm using, I actually used this at the church I was at, Patrick Springs. This is how I kicked off a sermon series that was basically for 8 weeks I did Stump the Preacher like we did last week. I had asked people to, I'd asked people on Facebook, but I'd also asked people in the church to write questions that they had on Post-it notes, and they slapped them onto a wall. And then I would group those questions together into different weeks, and those were the sermons that I preached for that 8 weeks. And I called the series Questioning God, and put in parentheses, yes, it's okay. So that's where we're starting from tonight, is we're going to ask one of the questions that I've been asked most in ministry, that I've been asked most in general as a Christian, a lot of times by believers. And this question often comes worded in several different ways. So if God is good and loving and God is a provider, why are there starving kids in Africa? If God is just, why are there such a thing as child molesters? How could God let 9/11 happen? Why doesn't God just wipe out cancer? Why are there birth defects? How can a loving God allow people to suffer like this? Or usually how this question is asked is, why do bad things happen to good people? It's the world we live in, right? It's one of the toughest questions of faith that we have. Most have concluded that there has to be only 3 options to answer this question. Number 1 is there is no God. Of especially, the United States, this would be the answer we've settled on, right? If there's evil in the world, there cannot be God. Right? Even World War II, very famously, there was a Jewish teacher who lost his faith, survived the concentration camp, and said, there must not be a God, because there's no way God could allow this to happen to people. All right, if you want to go ahead and open that to First Capital Christian Church's website, then there'll be a tab at the top that says Rooted, and everybody just needs to pass that around. You'll have to hit refresh each time to start it over again. But I'll put you in charge of that, Matt.
If we can pass it around or not, I have to just walk up here and do it.
Okay, well, you're in charge of that. My class is going on. So, number 2, the second option people arrive to is that God is powerless. Maybe God doesn't do anything because God can't do anything. That he would change things if he could, but he just must not be able to. Because if God is loving, obviously somebody who's loving would not let these things happen, right? Or the third option is that God either isn't good or he doesn't care. Thomas Jefferson would be a great example of this. Thomas Jefferson was very famously what's called a deist. Thomas Jefferson believed that God created the earth, that he set it spinning, and that was it. He left and he never came back. He did not believe that Jesus was God. Believed Jesus was a teacher, cool, whatever. Very famously, He took a Bible and he cut chunks out of his Bible of everything he didn't believe. And it's just literally full of holes. They have that Bible in the Library of Congress. Mom and I have seen it in person. He just concluded God just doesn't care. That must be what happens. My dad used to say he knew a guy growing up that believed that God was a cruel child who he described this image that he'd seen of a kid grabbing a spider that's making a spider web, and he grabs it by the string and he slowly lowers it into the fire because he enjoys watching it struggle to try and keep out of the flames and try and avoid dying. So God must not be good. That must be why bad things happen to good people, is because God is bad. Obviously, I don't believe any of these answers. None of them satisfy, and none of them describe the God I see in the Bible. None of them describe the God I see in this world. Because I have seen things happen. I shared this in the group. A friend of mine was very worried that his wife, they have 4 little kids, and she had a lump. And the lump is now gone because many of us were praying for her. I've seen it happen. A guy named Sandy Johnson, who I knew at the first church I was at, he had a tumor that he had throat cancer so bad, the tumor visibly pushed out of his skin. Looked like a golf ball on the outside of his skin. And our church gathered together and circled up and prayed for him. And the golf ball disappeared. He still had cancer and he still died, but it added months to his life. So I believe that there is a God, that he is good, and that he is powerful, even though he doesn't always choose to interact. And frankly, that's where the questions come, right? You know, the fact that God doesn't always intervene. You know, why Sarah, and why not the tens of thousands of other women, probably just in the state of Virginia, that have cancer? I don't know. But to look at realistic answers, we're going to look at some answers. And we're going to start with what I consider the least satisfying answer. All right, but this is one you'll also often get in churches. Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, the first answer is because there's no one good. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, we want to look at our world and, yeah, this person's better than this person, you know. This person's a serial killer, this person's a terrorist, this person's a child molester, and Mother Teresa. You know, but is anyone really truly good? They may be good by our standards and what we can see, but that's not the standard that matters. So we're not comparing ourselves to the worst of mankind. We're not even comparing ourselves to the best of mankind. That's not where the standard lies. In Romans chapter 3, if you want to take a minute to turn there. All right, Romans chapter 3. Somebody read verses 10 through 12 for me, please.
As it is written, there is none righteous, not even one. There is none who understands. There is none who seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become useless. There is none who does good. There is not even one.
Did you catch that? There is no one who does good, not even one. Paul goes on to say in Romans that we try to earn our salvation, or try and earn God's love through doing good acts, But even the good acts that we do are gifts from God. They're not from ourselves. They are things that God gives to us as a blessing to us, because he enjoys having that relationship with us. Just like we enjoy, doing stuff with our kids. That's the same way he is for us. And that's why he does this. That's why he does these good things. But, Romans is pretty clear here that there is no one good. In James 2:10, James wrote, "For whoever keeps the whole law yet stumbles at one point of it is guilty of breaking all of it." So what that means is you're either righteous or you're not. We have the political sin of the day, always going around. It was homosexuality for a long time, with the AIDS epidemics up to the gay marriage, and now it's like that's kind of been conceded as lost to most people, that we lost that power to the battle, and that the world has won. Well, now what's the next thing they're doing? According to the published homosexual agenda, the next thing on the list is lowering the age of consensual sex. And we're seeing it. We're seeing television shows trying to popularize a man having a relationship with a 12-year-old girl. We're seeing this happen. You don't believe me? You've never heard of Game of Thrones. We're seeing this happen where, in other parts of the world, you have Boko Haram that very famously rose to prominence in America as a terrorist organization because they were kidnapping children, usually about age 6 years old on average, and using them as wives.
I have a question about that.
Yep.
Wasn't it back in the day that it was normal for women at like 12, 13, 14 years old to marry older men? Like, wasn't it usual? I don't know.
Yeah, there are a lot of terrible things that were normal
I'm
back
saying
in
that
the day.
that's not necessarily new. It's
Mary
just,
was 15 years old when she was pledged to be married to Joseph, if that's the kind of thing you're referring to.
Yeah, I mean, you say, well, that's marriage, that's not consensual sex. But whenever it comes to like a marriage, especially back in the day, it was like they had to consummate the marriage for it to be legit. So
Yeah, well, our courts still recognize that.
yeah, so it's like they were okay with it back then. I mean, when I say back then, I don't know.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that happened back then that God displays out, especially in the New Testament. So it's like, you did this, but Jesus steps in and goes, but that's wrong.
Yeah.
Even though that's your common practice.
Okay. So it's not that, it's not necessarily new. It's just
Yeah.
it was done and then it stopped. Everybody stopped because it was bad. And now it's like,
And now they're trying to normalize it again.
there's a lot of things.
Only
that
now
happen.
they're selling t-shirts that have like the rainbow that's been co-opted by homosexuality, and it's a man holding like a toddler's hand, and it's like, it's my choice or something like that. Well, the problem is the kid that young is not able to make the choice. They're property and they're an object, but it's happening all the time. And the solution to that is to normalize it. I mean, it was just all over the news. The biggest thing was they finally found that 13-year-old that had been kidnapped. A 21-year-old had kidnapped her as she was getting ready to go to the bus at school and had locked her in a basement and was raping her. And they're trying to normalize that. My point being that on the scales of justice, we are just as guilty as that person. Because anyone who keeps the whole law yet stumbles at one point is guilty of breaking all of it. We're on the same level as that. Because we have broken a part of God's law. God will list out terrible sins that people have committed, and they'll be like murder and adultery and rape and gossip and lying. And we go, oh, hold on, wait a minute, this took a turn. Suddenly I'm on that list, and I'm not supposed to be on that list. I'm a good person. You ask the average person in America if they're going to heaven, they will say yes. And you ask them why, they'll say, I'm a good person, I never killed anybody. But that's not the measure God uses.
So are you saying every sin's the same?
Every sin is the same. Every sin weighs the same on the scales of God. And no matter how much good we do, it can never outweigh the sin.
So lying is considered sin?
Absolutely. I've used this metaphor before, but imagine I have a pan of brownies up here. I say, hey, Shay, you want some brownies? It's a good looking brownies, huh? Only problem is there's a little bit of dog poop in the batter. He said, oh, then no. Who wants some dog poop brownies? Nobody? Nobody? What if I put some icing on the brownies? Then will you eat the dog poop? What if I made a Mississippi mud? I'll put marshmallows and hot fudge on them. You want the brownies in?
No, he won't with the marshmallows.
Draw the line at marshmallows.
Yeah. So, but it brings the point, and that's not original to me, but I've used it for years because it does bear the point. No matter how much you add to it, you can't get rid of the impurity. I can double the batch of the batters, but there's still dog poop in it. I still don't want to eat it. And it's the same thing with God. If you are tainted by sin, it's that impurity. You got the dog poop in you. And no matter how much good you can do, you still poop brownies. In the end, that's all there is. So it is true. Bad things happen to good people. That not one of us is really actually good because we've all done things that are bad. It's accurate. It's not really a satisfying answer, is it? Because it really doesn't explain everything. Because you know who's never sinned? That baby born with fetal alcohol syndrome. They didn't do anything wrong. Mom may have, but they didn't do anything wrong. Or how about the baby born with spina bifida? They didn't do anything wrong, but they'll be crippled the rest of their lives. So, they haven't sinned. But bad things are still happening to them. The number one cause of death in America is abortion. And those babies didn't do anything wrong. They haven't sinned yet. So it's not only an unsatisfactory answer, it's an incomplete answer. Alright? Alright, answer number 2, if you want to go ahead and start flipping over to Genesis chapter 3. The second answer why bad things happen is that we live in a fallen world. Because yes, some things happen that are because no one is good. But some things happen because our world ain't so good anymore. So Genesis chapter 3. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. So I'll flip all the way to the front. And then somebody read verses 17 through 19, please.
Then to Adam he said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Curse the ground for your sake, in toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. The 17 and 18?
19 too, please.
Oh, okay. And in the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return.
Alright, so, in Genesis, God creates the world. He not only calls it good, he calls it very good. The word very is used only a few times in the Old Testament. We put very on everything, or really, or super. They didn't. Alright, so when he calls it very good, that's special. He's declaring the world good. But Adam and Eve choose to sin. And because of Adam's sin, you have these consequences. That the ground is cursed. The very earth, all of creation is cursed. That all these bad things start happening. Mosquitoes start coming. Divorce, birth defects, death itself enters the world because of the choices of Adam.
One question. It
Yep.
says preferred group. Is
Uh,
it couple or individual, or does it matter?
Put couple.
Okay.
If you're basically
But I'll need to do
put-
mine and his, though. We'll have to have two separate registrations, though, right?
no, because there's a place for spouse on there.
Okay. All
So
right,
you can
that'll
just do
cover
him
it.
as spouse, and then you'll have to do a separate one for Shay. So
How about couple though too?
No, are we all trying to do Wednesday? So
Yeah.
Wednesday.
I put
We
in
have to have
Wednesdays.
childcare,
Okay, good
so
deal.
ours
Yeah,
is
'cause I don't wanna be
Yep.
separated. I don't wanna be separated, 'cause that's.
But yeah, so everything's good, and he warns them. I've created this whole garden for you, but here's this one tree that we say the knowledge of good and evil. The actual word there would be more akin to intimacy. You will be intimate with evil if you eat this tree. You will no longer be innocent. And so what does Adam do? Heads right for it, right? You tell a kid, don't want you to touch that. What's the first thing they're going to do?
Go to it.
They're going to touch it.
I thought it was Eve that went first.
Well, it says Adam and Eve went together, and Eve eats it first, but she says she gave it to her husband who was with her. So they're there together having this conversation. An interesting point, whereas Eve does get a lot of the blame. Very clearly, the Bible says Adam was commanded, don't eat of that. And then he says to Eve, hey, God told me we're not supposed to eat that one. But when Satan asks, the first thing he says is he goes, did God really say you're not supposed to eat that? And Eve turns and looks at Adam next to him, and he says nothing. There's a book out called The Silence of Adam. Had he spoken up, his number one job is to protect Eve. Had he spoken up, had he protected Eve, we don't have the world we have today. But he didn't. Instead, he knowingly ate the fruit. And that's why she gets like a mild curse, if that makes sense, and he gets a heavier curse. Her curse is, your husband's going to treat you like crap, and you're going to have pain in childbearing. To Adam, he says, the whole world is cursed, and everything is going to be destroyed and die because of you. You see who God puts the blame on? Even Paul wrote.
That man.
Even Paul wrote that Eve was deceived, but Adam knowingly sinned. Therefore, the fault lies with Adam. And here you have this. You have hurricanes, you have tornadoes, you have cancer, you have death. All these basically things that happen in our world, all the physical things that happen because all creation is cursed because of Adam. Do you have a question, Shay?
But what does it mean by being destroyed, though? Was that like supposed to be like the Noah's flood thing, or was that like?
No, it's talking about that in like where we talked about the end of Revelation. God's going to destroy the whole earth and all of evil and death and everything like that. And that's when you get the new heaven, and just those that have become believers will be gathered up in heaven, whereas everything else and everyone else gets destroyed. And that's all because of Adam. Now, an interesting part of Eve's curse, I'll also mention this, is what is called, fancy Latin term, proto-evangelium,
It's true. Spell it.
which actually means first evangelism or first gospel. All right? In Eve's curse, it says, her offspring saying to the snake. No, it's actually in Satan's, I think. but her offspring will crush your head, and you will bite his heel. All right, so what he's saying there to the serpent, in referring it to his or her offspring in a patriarchal society, meaning man-based society, it's the first prophecy that Jesus would be born of a virgin, that he would ultimately defeat Satan, and the bruising the heel refers to, yes, Satan, or Jesus would die, but it would be temporary. All right, so very interesting that right there in the middle of the curse you have the first promise of Jesus. Very interesting.
So I always heard like that Eve's curse was the fact that women bled.
It says,
Childbirth.
yeah, it says pain in childbirth.
Or pain in childbirth, that's right.
Yeah. The bleeding, I don't think is mentioned there.
Like
Anyway.
pain in childbirth or pain and childbirth?
It says increased pain in childbirth.
I mean, it kind of makes sense. That's a human being coming out again. It does hurt.
Well, but look at, like, bears have babies about the same size, but not nearly the pain. They don't wake up. Did you know that? Bears give birth while hibernating. They are still asleep. The babies are born and start nursing before mom ever wakes up.
Like, oh, hey, what's up?
She just wakes up and goes, "What are you? Something's touching me." Some of you know that feeling. You wake up and go, oh, "There's a face right there." Right? Were you that? You ever like that? Were you the kid who's just the face?
No.
Brianna's like that. She's
Oh,
going
my
down to his
goodness.
room
I'm a
and
kid.
just stares at him.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
in my room, you have the
Weird.
silhouette from like the laundry room, like coming in. I just see her silhouette every now and then.
Oh my gosh. She's creepy.
I almost hit my
We
niece
love
one
her
time
when she's creepy.
because if something gets in my face, your natural reflex is to go and just clock it. I almost got Kate accidentally because there was face right there.
Did you do hers?
Thankfully, she was far enough back. I missed.
Well, Jack just walks up to me and just slaps Bear in the face. Daddy, wake up!
That makes sense for you.
Not like an animal, but it's a kid.
All right, so continuing on this, Romans chapter 8, verses 19 through 21 says, all right, Romans chapter 8, verses 19 through 21 says, "The creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into glorious freedom of the children of God." What that's saying is that all these things that happen on the earth is literally like these earthquakes are the planet Earth groaning because it can't wait for you to become a Christian. The world wants you to become a Christian, to become a child of God.
Where is that at?
That's Romans chapter 8, verses 19 through 21. That creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. Elsewhere in the Bible, it describes the things that happen in the world as birth pains, interestingly enough, to go on with the creation. And as you women can attest, birth pains get more intense and closer together as time comes. And if you look at our earth, the earthquakes, the tornadoes, all this stuff are getting more intense and closer together as as the time comes. Our world blames it on global warming, even though scientific evidence has swayed against that. Now they call it, now why they call it climate change instead of global warming?
Yeah.
Because the planet has been cooling since 2003. So it ain't warming anymore.
Except for the icebergs are melting.
Yeah. Well, another interesting thing about the icebergs, as they have receded, as they've melted, they have found Viking settlements in northern Greenland that they never knew were there. Because they have evidence that shows that the Earth is on 1,000-year warming and cooling cycles. In other words, it was at a high warming trend like it is right now when Jesus walked the Earth. And 1,000 years before that when David walked the Earth. And, 1,000 years after Jesus when the Vikings walked the Earth. And now, we see these cycles.
When did they learn this, that it changes every 1,000 years?
As they've studied the whole global warming thing, they've found more and more evidence of this. Really, if you pay attention, we talked about this some last week. The best argument they have for global warming is they say, well, 90% of climatologists believe in global warming. Okay, for one, science is not up for a vote. If 90% of climatologists believe that bacteria don't exist, that doesn't cure the flu.
You're like, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's not up for a vote. But the other problem with that is they went into that field because they believed in that already. That's like saying 90% of preachers believe in God. Well, of course they do. They became preachers because they believe in God.
I'd be questioning the other 10%.
Exactly. So, you got to do the same with the climatologists. So, first answer, there is no one good. True but unsatisfactory. Second answer, we live in a fallen world. It's also a true answer. But neither of these answer why God doesn't intervene in the things that are going on in the world. All right, so, questions so far?
Not a question, but a comment. You've seen Bruce Almighty, right?
Yep.
When he looks out the window,
Yep.
5 billion prayers going up. How's he do it all? I mean, I'm just saying he can't. I don't think he could do it all because we don't want the perfect world we think we want.
Yeah. Well, in Bruce Almighty, he makes an interesting point. At one point, he answers every prayer yes.
Yeah.
And then things blow up. It makes everything far, far worse.
Like, I always love that song, and it makes me think of a lot of things. The whole, some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I love it. And I think about that a lot. Because I think about, when it comes to me and Sean's relationship, when I was a teenager, I was, 15, 16, I was in love with whoever it was. I'd pray, we get married and have kids, and it's like, and me and him didn't.
Try to get him to change.
Yeah, and it's like,
Which we usually do.
I mean, that's one of his greatest gifts is that he didn't.
Yeah, when I was 14 years old, I was angry and bitter and full of guilt and also a desire to sin. I turned my back on Christianity and started exploring other things. Kept going to church because my friends were here in the youth group, so I was hanging out with my friends for a couple hours a week, whatever. So still, outwardly, everything looked fine. Inwardly, I was done. I'd walked away. And I wanted to become an atheist. Only problem was I kept investigating and kept finding more that showed that that was wrong. The answer that I wanted wasn't the answer that I found. And we talked about that some last week, these famous people who have all tried to do the same and also became Christians. Did you buy that book?
I bought the book. Hopefully it's here tomorrow.
Yeah, there you go. Lee Strobel's, did you go with Case for Christ or Case for the Creator?
Case for Christ.
Case for
It was
Christ.
like $12 on the website I found it on.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So,
and that was with shipping.
but the unanswered prayers thing, I started praying for God to make me an atheist.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean, idiot. But I was 14. Of course I was an idiot. We were all idiots when we were 14. So, yeah.
How long did it take your dad to change your mind, too?
Well, I'm just saying that's a great example of unanswered prayer being the right answer. So, moving on, we'll go to our third answer of why bad things happen. Answer number 3, and you all probably already know this, is oftentimes consequences for our sins. Exodus chapter 20, verses 5 and 6 says, "For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the sins of the fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." All right, so we see this true in our own world, right?
Yep.
Children of alcoholics grow up to be alcoholics. They see everything that's wrong and everything they don't want to be, and they rush toward it unless somebody chooses to break the cycle. But that's hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many times somebody said, the greatest prank God ever played on the world was making humanity have children. You want somebody that disrespects you and pretends that you don't exist? Have a kid. Have a teenager. That's...
Well, there were some dirty looks.
Then, yeah.
There's a lot of love behind them.
Then you start to understand how God feels about you. When you have that 3-year-old throwing a tantrum, you understand a little bit more about how God looks at you. And so sometimes the things that happen to us are the consequences of our sin. I hate to get political, but the Bible teaches, I'm looking at no one because I don't want to see anyone's facial reactions because I don't know where anyone lies on the political spectrum. So whether you liked the last president or the current president or none of the above, I have been asked, if God directs the nations, why would he allow, whichever terrible leader of the day you want to point to, whichever politician you hate the most, whatever. Why would God allow that? And I think he's allowing us to live with the choices we are making as a nation.
You said he gave us free will.
Yep.
And we're apparently exploiting that.
Yeah. Sometimes we do really stupid stuff with free will. And sometimes, if you're a parent, you let your kid deal with the consequences. You tell your kid 100 times, don't put your finger on the toaster, it's hot. Well, you do the 101st time, you let him touch his sinking toaster. Why? Apparently they got to learn it the hard way.
Hey, we got a story. Tell a story. Daniel?
Daniel, the eldest, he couldn't get his toast out of the toaster, so he stuck a fork in it.
Did it blow up?
Say that again. I missed something.
He got a little jolt from it.
Oh my.
His toast was stuck in the toaster. He didn't unplug it. Stuck a fork in there.
Well, he was standing on one of the little metal air conditioning grates, and it was also ice cube on the floor that melted.
It was like
So not a
Final
little
Destination.
joke.
No, it knocked him flat
Please
out
tell
in
me
the
this
air.
did not happen 2 weeks ago. How old was he?
Oh, he was young.
Oh shoot.
I'd say probably 12, 13 maybe.
I'd say about 11.
Oh.
Oh my gosh.
But you understand where this happens. Sometimes a kid goes down a path and you warn them, you try and stop them, but they go down the path.
Does that mean I'm a bad parent when I let my 5-year-old go get zapped when he sticks something in a wall again?
No, that's exactly the point I'm getting at, is that they've got to learn. And sometimes they got to learn the hard way. And in the same way, when we make choices, God allows us to live with the choices we make. This is not my will. I don't want you to do this. We had a guy in church I went to. He and his wife started coming to our church when the husband started dating another woman. And he said, I'm really torn because I met this woman on a Christian dating website. And I'm trying to I'm trying to wait for God to show me what he wants me to do and which woman he wants me to be with. And we pulled out our Bibles and we opened it to Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments. Do not commit adultery. He put it in writing. It's in black and white in front of you. What are you waiting for? You know,
Now,
he
he's still
told you
married, right?
this.
Yeah.
Still married, man?
Still married.
Oh,
Okay, all right.
Vow.
Now I'm following.
You vow before God that.
Yeah. You said you're what?
Exactly. Yeah.
But he ends up blowing up his marriage. This other woman had a resume like the Samaritan woman at the well. She had been married 4 times prior and now had met this guy on a Christian dating website. She knows he's married, and she's still sniffing out of the guy. What do you think's going to happen if you go and get with this guy? He's going to wait for the next thing to come along, and he's going to do it all over again.
Yeah. I agree with that.
That's what happens when you get with a cheater.
Well, she's going to be on there again looking for a wife, husband.
Oh, yeah,
No.
yeah.
But he blows up his life. He loses his job. After he loses his job, he stops drinking. His wife gets fed up with the, well, maybe I will stay with you, maybe I won't, throws him out of the house. You're already, as Jesus said, you're already committing adultery in your heart, so get out. Blew up his entire life. Why? Wasn't anybody else's choice. It was the choices he made, and he lives with it. If you sleep around and you catch an STD, you can't say, why would God allow this to happen to me? You did it to yourself. If you drink and drive and you kill this family, why would God allow me to live with this guilt? Because you did it. Sometimes the terrible things that happen, you steal and you go to jail, it's your fault. I stopped a theft this week. I was really excited at the bank. A lady came in with a check for $1,000 from her grandma. And I was processing the transaction. She answered every question, came off just like normal. Only I noticed the signature on the back matched the handwriting on the front. And so I called to verify the check with Grandma. And sure enough, she had stolen checks and was writing checks on Grandma's account and cashing them, saying that Grandma was helping her out with bills. Only Grandma didn't know. Now she's committed felonies. This was check number 6 before she got caught.
Were they all $1,000? Or do you know?
5 of the 6 of them were $1,000. The first one was for $200, where she was testing to see if she'd get away with it.
Oh, wow.
If she goes to prison, I ended up talking to Grandma and to her mom.
Oh, thank you.
When she ends up going to prison for committing a felony, by the way, bank fraud, federal felony, so we're not even talking state prison, so have fun with that. When she goes to prison, she may say, well, how dare Grandma and Mom turn this in and blah, 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 and why would they come after me?
Blame God on this one.
Yeah, she could be. She blames God on that one.
Yeah.
But who does she have to blame?
Herself, supposedly.
Nobody wrote those checks but her. Sometimes God allows us to live with the consequences. Why? Hebrews 12:6 says, because the Lord disciplines those he loves. He punishes everyone he accepts as a son. Sometimes consequences happen because God is trying to correct our behavior. If you're a good parent, you have paddled your child at some point along the line, or whatever discipline you and your spouse have agreed to. Whatever it is, you have inflicted discipline. Why? Because we've all seen those little brats who have never had consequences, and they're nightmares. Several of us have worked in schools. We know what we're talking about.
Woo! I can give you this right now.
Yeah, yeah. You've seen it. You know by the age of 2 which kid is getting disciplined at home and which kid isn't. You can already see which one. Yes, they all go through the terrible 2s, but some of them get that look from dad, and it's done.
Oh,
And some of them get that look from dad and slap dad in the face in public, and mom and dad do nothing.
Oh, we'd be outside.
Seen it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Outside.
We wouldn't have to go outside.
I was about to say, I never would have made it to the parking lot. Dad would have knocked my block off.
With all 3 of our kids, well, the little
Dad would have been the type, I can make another. I'll kill you.
like with the little ones, Bryson, that's it. Like if he does something wrong, I'll tell him, I'll be like, come here. And Sean's sitting next to me. He'll look at Sean as I'm talking to him, like scared. I'm like, I'm the one talking to you, not him. But he's scared.
Our
of
son
what he's
does
gonna
that.
do.
Weird how that.
But we see, we got a teenager in here. They discipline you because they love you.
Yeah.
We've got 2 other boys here. Mom disciplines you because she loves you.
Isn't that cute? I love it.
My grandmother outlived my dad, but when my dad was 60 years old, well, no, he never made it to 60. When my dad was 50 years old, he said my mother would still take me over her knee to this day if she thought I deserved it. And my dad was bigger than both of his parents by the age of 12. Because he was huge and they were tiny. They were about like this size, and Dad was this size.
My dad said he'd get on a step stool if he had to, but he
Yeah.
was me looking down at me when he did.
So-
They had a grandma that could throw a shoe around a corner and it would turn.
Oh,
and hit him.
they run from her.
She could fling it and it'd like spin around a corner if they were on
It's
the
all
other
the
side.
wrist. It's
Holy cow.
Taking around the kitchen table and.
All right, so that's, consequences of sin, fallen world, no one's good, all good answers, but we're not there yet. Sometimes bad things happen because of the consequences of other people's sin. Sometimes things happen, it's not your fault. You can't blame the people that were in the towers and in the Pentagon on 9/11. Not even the guys in the planes. Only the guys in the cockpits made the decisions. But a lot of people still suffering. There are people who were first responders who are getting like mesothelioma and stuff from those towers collapsing and all the dust that they inhaled for weeks trying to rescue people. It's not because they did anything wrong. It's because other people did evil to them. Now, yes, our culture loves to blame victims. And it can go back and forth. Sometimes, if a cop wants to be a hero, get shot. If a cop wants to be a villain, shoot the bad guy.
Just arrest him.
Hands up, don't shoot.
Yeah, just
Only
don't
it never
Just arrest
happened. The guy beat the cop half to death. He spent 2 weeks in a coma. The guy in St. Louis. But he is the hero and the cop's a villain. Because he shot the guy in self-defense after his skull was caved in. Yeah, a little bit of truth to that. Luke chapter 13, verses 1 through 5. Now there were some present at the time who told Jesus about Galilean whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices. In other words, Pilate sent soldiers into the Jewish temple and slaughtered people to where their blood mixed with the blood of the bulls and the goats that they were sacrificing on that day. Okay, that's what it's saying. Jesus answered, do you think these Galileans were worse sinners than all other Galileans because they suffered this way? I tell you, no. But unless you repent, you too will all perish. Or those 18 who died when the Tower of Siloam fell on them, do you think they were more guilty than any others living in Jerusalem? I tell you, no. Sometimes the bad things that happen. Hey, the tower collapsed on you because the guy cut corners and did, shoddy work when he was constructing the thing. It's not your fault that you worked there. Pilate comes in and wholesale slaughtered people. We can do a whole lesson on Pilate just butchering people and how the Jews used that to blackmail him into crucifying Jesus. It's in there. We can talk about it sometime. But he's saying, no, bad stuff happened to these people. It wasn't their fault. They're innocent. One of my favorite healing miracles of Jesus is this man born blind. And the disciples, probably Peter, because Peter likes to shoot his mouth off, goes, so who sinned, him or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus goes, neither one of them, you idiot. They didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes bad stuff happens because there are evil people out there. And they're terrible. And we're trying to reach them. We want to love them. We want them to not be evil, but dadgum, evil's out there. It wasn't the Jews and the Romanis and the disabled's fault that Hitler came for them. It was Hitler's fault. And yet, many times, we try to take the blame for crap other people do to us. There's stuff that happened to you that is not your fault. Whether it's a parent's divorce or, someone abused you, whatever it is, it's not your fault. There are evil people out there. And they suck. But that stuff happens. And you know what? God hates it too. He watched it happen to Jesus. And if you haven't been paying attention, it was us that did it to him. Because it wasn't nails that held Jesus to the cross, it was your sin. You were the one who did evil to Jesus. Only God used it to make a sacrifice so that way you could be his child instead. That when none of us is good, well, the one good guy, we murdered him. And God went, if you'll accept his blood on you, you can be my child. I'll love you just like I loved him. I'll cut the poo out of the brownies. You'll be pure, and you'll be mine. It's a big deal. But that's still not the total answer. There's a fifth part of this answer, and it's huge. And it's one that we tend to forget, and by we I mean me. We tend to forget when we're, to use Randy's language, when we're in the storm and we're screaming out, Jesus, don't you care? We forget that there's somebody else there too. But we talked a lot about him going through the book of Revelation. We have an enemy, right? The dragon, the deceiver, Satan, the accuser of the brethren, the father of lies, the devil. We have an enemy. You know how Jesus describes him in John 10:10? The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. That is how Jesus describes Satan. A thief and a murderer. That's what he wants. That's what he wants to do. 1 Peter 5:8 says, your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking to someone to devour. And you know what? Satan's got pretty good at deceiving us, at leading us into sin, destroying everything that's supposed to give us peace. It was Satan who was there as the serpent with Adam and Eve. He caused them to sin. He led them into sin. Yes, it's still their actions. They still made their terrible choices. But he was the one leading them and tempting them. And he was the one that, guided Cain into murdering his brother Abel. And he is the one that was guiding the people who hurt you. And he's the one guiding you when you hurt yourself, when you hurt others, and when you hurt God. He loves the fact that our planet's fallen. He loves the destruction of a tornado. Or the people that die in the snowstorms. Or the drunk drivers. Or the house fires. Or cancer. He revels in it. He loves it. And the genius thing that he has us convinced of is that when he does evil crap to us, we blame God and we end up siding with the one who hurt us. It's brilliant. It's a genius strategy, and it's working. You see it every day in hurting people. And every one of us hears those whispers too, don't we? I told you guys, part of the reason we're doing Rooted is I need it. I've been going through a bad time, and I have been listening to those lies far too much. It's the disciples shouting at the boat at Jesus, don't you even care that we're going to die? Jesus not only cared, he could do something about it. He cares. The fact that we're drowning. And he comes to our rescue. But so many times, we turn away from him. And when we do, we're siding with the one who brought on the storm to begin with. That's what happens when we lose faith, when we listen to this deception, when we say, if everything's going to crap anyway, I might as well sin. Because I might as well do something worthy of being punished. Or when things are going good, we go, I'm doing so good, I deserve to indulge in a little sin.
I did that today with my diet.
That's what happens with almost universally with preachers that have affairs. Admit that the thought came into their head, I'm doing so much good for God, I deserve to indulge in a little sin. And they end up destroying everything. They ruin their churches, they ruin their families, they ruin whoever other's family that they're having the affair with. They ruin everything because they decided that they were doing enough good, that they deserve to indulge a little. They're doing enough good that they're worshiping themselves and following the enemy and put themselves back in chains as slaves of Satan. Wow. Did great on that, didn't we? And we all struggle with it. Every one of us does. We have an enemy and he is powerful. But that doesn't mean Jesus cares any less. As Randy said, he talked about Jesus calming the storm, but he also talked about another storm when he ends up walking on the waves. When Jesus walks on water, it wasn't calm. It was another storm like that. And they're convinced they're seeing like a ghost coming to take their souls, is how scared that they are. And Jesus shouts, no, it's me. And Peter says, well, prove it. If it's me, call me out and I'll walk on the water too. And he goes, come on. And Peter walks on the water for a little while until he notices what? He notices the storm raging around him. And that's when he starts to sink. And Randy, hinted at this story and said, sometimes Jesus doesn't calm the storm. Sometimes he walks through the storm with us. That's what Randy hinted at. And it's still true. It's hard to see when you're in the middle of it, though. We can talk about the reasons bad thing happened when we have. And it's good reminders because truth helps us fight Satan's lies. But we also got to hold on to this truth. That in the end, Book of Revelation we just finished, Jesus turns it all on its head. For every bad thing you go through, Jesus has a reward waiting for you to make it all worth it. In the end, Randy talked about this with Lazarus, calling Lazarus forth. Yeah, he raised him from the dead, but then Lazarus dies again later. That was temporary. And yeah, sometimes God fixes things in the here and now, in the temporary. But even if he doesn't, he fixes them all in the hereafter, in eternal life, if we walk with him. Anybody have any questions about anything we talked tonight, or spawned a question as we've been talking?
I have, it kind of goes along, with what we talked about today and then what you talked about Sunday is a big problem that I have is, I guess, having the faith of it, I don't know, but being okay with things that aren't being helped with. Like, when you feel like, God's not answering your prayers, he's not helping, whenever I struggle with being okay with it. And being able to not necessarily move on, but to be able to handle it. Like, that's where I struggle.
I don't know if we necessarily have to be okay with it. Because it does suck, and God's not denying that. Jesus says, if you follow me, you're in for a world of trouble. Hey, world's in for a lot of trouble anyway. But he says, bad things are going to happen to you. Jesus has no hesitation about that. Again, the first thing he does when he comes up to Lazarus' grave, he hadn't be like, "Oh, knock it off, you weenies." First thing he does, he pulls in Lazarus' two sisters, and he just weeps with them. It's the shortest verse in the Bible. John 11:35. Jesus wept. Or, yeah, I think that's it. Shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. The Bible says sometimes, the only thing we can do to change things is we cry with those who are crying. Straight up true. So I don't think we necessarily have to be okay with it. The Psalms are full of times where people aren't okay with it and they're just like screaming mad at God.
I've never gotten to a point where I'm mad at him for.
Oh, really? I have.
I mean, when I was a kid. I mean, I don't know. As an adult too, I guess, but I just.
Not lately?
Not lately, I guess. I guess it's just, the being able to kind of just sit back and let whatever's going to happen. Like, I can't do that. When someone else is good at just kind of going with the flow, and I
Well, I think there's a balance to be achieved there, and that's why you're married, is because sometimes something needs to be pushed, and you push, and sometimes things need to be calmed, and he calms. So, that's a balance that you want.
Overpowers the pushing.
And sometimes maybe that's needed. Sometimes maybe that's exactly needed. Is, you got to lean on his calmness when your piece has been taken from you.
If both of you get uptight about it, it's just going to make it that much worse. Then you need that balance.
Yeah, I mean, there is a truth to that. You need the balance. And sometimes pushing's a good thing, because sometimes pushing is what pushes you to do something about it, or sometimes it just pushes you to knees in prayer. And that's all good. Again, the Bible's full of times where people are not okay with what's going on, and they get upset and they get worked up about it. But they also go, but you're still God no matter what's going on. That's the beauty of the God that we have. Circumstances can change the people that we know. You put somebody in a bad circumstance, you can push them too far and you can break them. God doesn't break. Circumstances never change who he is. And so that's a great thing about it, is that sometimes we get pushed to our breaking point and he goes, it's okay, I got this. He's bigger than all of that, and sometimes he uses those circumstances to remind us. That doesn't remove our responsibility to do what we can do, to be obedient to him throughout those circumstances. But it also doesn't give us responsibility for the outcome. Does that make sense? And so there's definitely a balance there. And if you ever need help, find the line. 812-705-1150. I was going to text you. I realized I don't have your phone number saved, so I need you to text me, actually.
You can text me. My son apparently got on websites looking for jobs, and I'm getting 100 texts and phone calls a day.
So you want to answer if I text you?
He had
I have your number saved, so it'll come up.
he had a college call and asked, "Are you ready for your?" He ain't even finished with high school yet. No.
He's 16. He's still a junior in high school. He finished high school.
That's when they do their recruiting.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't want
I said he's not interested in it right now. I said he hasn't even graduated high school yet. Let's get him through high school. And she goes, well, what about you, sir? What can I do?
Call you, sir.
I'm not
That's
interested.
called doing her job well.
And I said, I appreciate you trying, but I'm not interested.
What's a good SAT score?
I don't know, because they've changed them since I've taken them.
The scores are higher now than they used to be.
Yeah,
So is
when
780 good or?
when I took them,
No, not really.
a 1600 was the max, and now it's like a 2000 is the max. What's the highest you can get?
1600's perfect.
Oh, yeah.
when we took it, but they've changed it.
Well, I googled it.
It's higher.
It says 1600 was perfect.
They've changed it back again.
But if you pull a
Whatever it is.
1600, that's awesome. I mean,
Yeah, so shoot for a 1600.
Double what you got. That he already got.
Well, you know you can take them as many times as you want,
Oh.
and sometimes if you can boost those scores up a little bit, then you can get better scholarships and stuff, and school becomes cheaper. Just saying.
Not gonna get you.
I was just
They're not gonna give you a scholarship.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I forget where I was going before you asked me about the SATs. But yeah, basically, we're responsible for our actions and our reactions, but not the outcomes of things that happen around us, because we can't change those things. And you know how hard that is for me to say, because I hate hearing? As not just a man who have hard enough time accepting that there are things we can't fix, but as a preacher, it's that much better. Yeah. But, the important thing is, Jesus does have power and control that we don't have, and he does care.
Well, a lot of us went up there Sunday and threw a bunch of problems in a boat too. Stuff
Yeah,
that's
see,
up
I had to
here.
take the offering place to the back, so I went up after the service and threw mine in the boat.
So, I mean, sometimes I think
What
it's
happened to
better
those?
just-
Did y'all take them out back and burn them or something?
I have no
I
idea.
feel like that would be.
Probably.
Oh,
I
no.
wouldn't doubt it.
And if you want to go ahead and kill video.